everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in today to talk about Kagurabachi, chapter number 49. This chapter is titled Deadlock, and look at that. We are on chapter 49 of Kagurabachi. We have one more chapter to go till we get to the big 50 to big 50. I guess really the first big, like, hey, celebratory number that a manga can get to, because, I mean, at a certain point, it's like, all right, you've reached chapter 50, all right, next is chapter 100, and then it's like 200, and then from there, you really just climb on to all of the 100s, and it's like, all right, 500 is like a really big deal. Not that I think Kagurabachi is going to be going on for 500 chapters. I really don't think this is a story that has that much tank in the engine to it. I mean, of course, My Hero Academia, which just ended, which was another massive series in Shonen Jump, only ran for 420 chapters. 500 is like a really big number, but we're not talking about chapter 500 today. We are talking about chapter number 49. Like I said, this chapter is titled Deadlock, as this chapter brings back the whole idea of the deadlock between the Hishaku and the Kabunagi forces, and pretty much what that means in relation to it, as we'll get further in depth to on this chapter. But this chapter is a very interesting one, as it is one of those chapters in manga, just like, all right, here's an action series. We're going to show you a lot of interesting, cool, weird fighting. We're not going to explain really anything that happens here, so you have to make up your own theories about all of this, and ends off on a note saying, all right, we're going to have more fighting going on in the future. And that's really what this chapter gets into the weeds about. Not that I think this chapter is a bad chapter or anything, but it is sort of just falling into that formula of, all right, this is how you write a good battle manga, and this is how you just progress this narrative in this way. But with that, I don't really think there's too much else to say beforehand, so I'd say let's just go and hop into this chapter of Kagurabachi. Of course, this is chapter number 49, so we need to ask ourselves, what happened last time in chapter number 48? Well, pretty much there we got a big in-depth detail on the Kokugoku Steam Squad, who were Aruha's protectors in the Kokugoku Hot Spring. I don't know why I said on the, and after they pretty much let Aruha go, they pretty much faced off against all of the Dotenseki troops inside of the fortress, and they ended up winning. And at the very tail end of last chapter, we met a new Hishaku sorcerer named Hirohiko, and we learned that they pretty much took out all of the Kokugoku Steam Squad. And at the end of last chapter, they just entered the train, where of course our three main characters are sitting, of course Chihiro, Hakuri, and Aruha. And pretty much we start off this chapter the same place that we left off last chapter, with Hirohiko standing at the entrance of the train, or of the train car, and Chihiro sort of standing in the middle of it, ready for battle with Hirohiko and all of the other Hishaku troops that have pretty much filed their way onto the train during all of this, right? Well, we start off this chapter pretty much with Chihiro pretty much looking at Hirohiko, and looking at them and taking a good look and saying, okay, I can tell they're the Hishaku by the flame symbol on their hand, but this person definitely wasn't there when they killed my father, as he pretty much pans around to the rest of the train and sees all the other Hishaku members, and pretty much puts two and two together, being like, all right, this makes sense. It seems like they are the main leader of this operation, the main sorcerer, and all of these other people are just sort of hired hands who are here for the sake of, I guess we're getting paid. But at this point, Chihiro just blatantly asks Hirohiko, like, hey, what are you trying to do here? And of course, Hirohiko, like, giving the obvious answer, just says, oh, I mean, we're just trying to kill Aruha and negate his eternal contract so we can use the enchanted blade Kumeyori, right? But Chihiro pretty much gives Hirohiko a different look, and Hirohiko then's like, oh, you mean that outside? As he pretty much pans out his vision outside to where the Kokugoku Steam Squad members are still pretty much slumped over on the bench after being bloodied and beaten in the Kokugoku Hot Spring. And I almost forgot the name. Hirohiko pretty much explains just like, yeah, I figured that Aruha would want to say goodbye, would want to say a proper goodbye to all of his former people. And Hirohiko pretty much explains like, hey, I'll give it to him, they were actually pretty tough. I mean, they even beat all the Dotenseki armed troops. I mean, and that's something to be very proud of. And Chihiro hears this and thinks, oh, wait, you're telling me that this guy slaughtered all of the Kokugoku Steam Squad when they took down all of the Dotenseki armed troops? That must make this person an absolute beast. Like, what am I going to do here? And as Chihiro's pretty much running through all of this and giving this preliminary talk done with Hirohiko, all of a sudden we cut outside of the train where a Shishaku sorcerer goes through and bursts through the window, pretty much aiming right towards a killing blow on Iruha. And pretty much nobody knows any of this is happening, and pretty much Akari's like, hey, Iruha, is everything going to be okay? As the glass suddenly shatters beside him, and this Hishaku member sort of comes through the door. But we see that Hirohiko, or not Hirohiko, Iruha is prepared. He pretty much unsheaves the blade and gets ready, and makes a nice little parallel cut along this guy here, and slaughters him before Iruha gets slaughtered himself. And having all of this happen, Iruha finally just speaks up and says, hey, Chihiro, focus. We have a job to do here, right? And hearing this, Chihiro's sort of like, right, I need to lock in, I need to do this, as he sort of starts to run over and get ready to attack Hirohiko, as Hirohiko's like, yeah, Iruha's right, we absolutely have a job to do here, guys. And Chihiro just thinks, right, my job is to protect Mr. Iruha, as he gets ready his enchanted blades and uses one of his Nishiki attacks to get ready to parry these blades. He just thinks like, hey, Nishiki, that's a Iruha pretty much thinks like, all right, he's using Nishiki right now, that's the power he used earlier, like all the people around him will have no time to respond. As Chihiro's just like, all right, ultra high speed Nishiki. But before he can do that, we see that Hirohiko suddenly claps their hands and forms pretty much that clap motion. And then, as soon as they clap them, they spring their hands outwards, as a bunch of small square sheets of paper have now formed in between their hands and in the arc that they have sort of created, right? And as all of this, Hirohiko just says, blood crane, as all of these sheets of paper suddenly fold themselves into paper cranes. And it seems like the next few moments happen in slow motion for all of these characters, as Chihiro comes through, uses the Nishiki, cuts off two of these Hishaku sorcerers' heads. But then these blood cranes come through, and they completely fly through these Hishaku sorcerer bodies, get covered in blood, and then almost explode in Chihiro's eyes, to where he now just has blood stuck in all of his eyes here, right? And as this happens, Hirohiko takes the initiative again, jumps off all of a sudden, runs towards Chihiro, grabs one of the blades out of one of the other Hishaku sorcerer's hands, and comes through and clasps blades with Chihiro, right? And Chihiro sort of being a little bit blinded here, he's able to parry, but just briefly, as all of a sudden Hirohiko's blade pretty much just shatters. But Hirohiko looks very much too happy for this, as Chihiro looks behind him, where he sees that 4 of these paper cranes have embedded themselves inside of Iruha's body, pretty much causing him some decent damage. Let me mute Discord there, as Hirohiko's pretty much, hey, aren't you Chihiro? Isn't your job to protect him? Aren't you supposed to be focusing on your job at hand? As pretty much Chihiro's like, damn it, and he's like, Hikari, centipede. As Hikari pretty much hears this and remembers his father, Kiora, whenever he was using the enchanted blade Shinichi, and just remembers to whenever he said centipede, as Hikari just remembers, oh, he means that. And he sort of jumps up now and grabs Iruha by his top knot and pretty much pulls him down to the ground, as Chihiro unleashes one of his Kuro attacks on the train car. And of course, Kuro is the attack that's like that long-range blade extension almost. So he pretty much cuts down all of the Hishaku sorcerers sort of in the general area, and he would have cut down Iruha and Haruki too if Haruki wouldn't have pulled Iruha down so the blade didn't hit him, right? So at this point, they're still in the train. All of the windows have now been busted open. All of these Hishaku sorcerers are like falling out the windows, and a bunch of deals going on, right? And pretty much here's like, hey, Mr. Iruha, are you okay? And Iruha's like, hey, I'm good. Don't worry about me. As, of course, Hirohiko is still here. They did not get harmed by that attack at all. It was more of just a like, oh, okay, that happened. So Hirohiko's now running towards Chihiro again, and just like, hey, that was a nice one, kid. As Hirohiko's pretty much just like, so now you need to get ready for this. As Iruha just thinks like, right, so the rest of these guys are no big deal, except for this person here with the long hair. Of course, referring to Hirohiko. And Iruha just thinks like, hey, this guy has the skill and speed to come after my life while defending himself against an enchanted blade. And he's like, it's a struggle for Chihiro to protect me and also deal with him at the same time. As Iruha pretty much didn't just suddenly speaks up, just says, hey, Chihiro, don't worry about me anymore. And just says, you have got this. As hearing this, of course, Hirohiko is still running towards Chihiro. And Chihiro at this point makes a split-second decision. And as Hirohiko's getting ready to attack him, Chihiro pretty much bumps into Hirohiko, and the two of them fly out of the window of the train here, right? And Hirohiko's like, are you crazy? What are you doing? Leaving Iruha on his own? Are you really sure about all of this? And Chihiro pretty much thinks like, right, hey, it's not ideal, but the risk of having this guy near him is 10 times worse. As he pretty much thinks back to the whole balance of power idea again, as he just thinks like, hey, it's just like Mr. Iruha said. The sorcerers using the Dotenseki are disposable to the Hishaku. Even with the extra power, elite fighters can easily beat them. And Chihiro thinks like, alright, so in other words, they're not the issue here. The issue is they weakened the Kabinagi guards enough so that their elite fighters could finish them off. As he pretty much just goes through the whole idea again of saying like, hey, the Kabinagi has 2 fighters with enchanted level fighting power, so of course thinking about himself and Hyuki, who of course has Flame Bone, and he then just thinks like, hey, and the Hishaku side has more than that, but they're very short-lived. But then he thinks, but on both sides, there are very skilled fighters without enchanted blades. He's like, our fighting power is actually split evenly. As we pretty much see the image that he uses to think about this is like, right, so if you have like Azami and Shiba for the Kabinagi side, the same thing is on the Hishaku side, we have fighters like Yura and, of course, Hirohiko here. And all things considered, we're very evenly matched because while our enchanted blade powers may last forever, the enchanted blade powers that the Hishaku have in form of the Dotenseki will actually last for a long time. So as Chihiro just thinks about this, he just thinks like, alright, so our key strategy is that soon Hikari's storehouse power will recover, and if Hikari can make contact with all of the sword bearers, he can transport the enchanted blades. So Hikari and Mr. Iruha are currently heading towards the Senku-Suji fortress. They'll meet up with another enchanted blade owner there. If Hikari is in contact with 2D enchanted blade owners and recovers his powers, very soon those 2 enchanted blades will break the deadlock. So pretty much if we just think about what Chihiro has thought here, what he's pretty much saying is that yes, while the Dotenseki warriors are a formidable opponent for a minute, their main job is to actually weaken up all of the Kabinagi forces, so in the end, the elite fighters like Hirohiko and Yura can come and take them out. And of course, looking at that split of power evenly again, and eventually it's good to know that of course we knew what Senku-Suji Temple was, and we now know for a fact that this is where the blind sword bearer lives, as we just get an image here of this. And then of course we get the idea of what these 2 other enchanted blades look like, of course, the Kumeyori, and then whichever one we know that this other blind guy had control of at one point. But of course we know this was always the plan to have Hikari use the storehouse powers on the enchanted blade users, but a very sort of interesting way for Chihiro to be thinking about this here, and pretty much to rationalize everything out so us as the audience know what's fully going on here, right? Well, at this point, we sort of cut more to the present action that's going on again, as both Chihiro and Hirohiko land on the ground outside of where they flew out of the train window, and they look to be in like a semi-decently populated area. Well, not really populated, but just there's a lot of buildings around it. The infrastructure looks pretty good, all things considered. But Hirohiko pretty much is just saying to Chihiro now, like, hey, so now that you don't have a person to protect, I guess you can really go on out. And she's like, hey, I absolutely love that. And Hirohiko just says like, hey, Yura is very interested in you, so I was really hoping to play along with you here today. But Hirohiko just continues saying like, hey, but too bad it's not just the 2 of us. As she just says like, again, like, hey, we're playing for keeps too, you might say. As all of a sudden, Chihiro looks out and sees that there are now some paper butterflies flying around this area. And each of these paper butterflies are carrying Dotenseki stones. As Chihiro sees this and he says, damn it, he's like, all those fighters we threw out of the train, like, they're nearly dead, but those stones, as Chihiro just thinks, crap. As Hirohiko just speaks up and just says, hey, we call them our counter-inten special force. As Hirohiko just says, like, hey, Chihiro Rokuhira, this means that we can completely kill you. As pretty much at this point, Chihiro just thinks, all right, this means the deadlock is about to be broken. As he gets ready and holds up a fighting stance ready, and he thinks back on all of the moments he's had throughout all of these series where Hoshaku have royally screwed him over, and just thinks like, all right, the time is now. And that is where we end off this chapter of Kagurabachi. So I want to talk about these last few pages here, because I really feel like these last three are very interesting. So it is very obvious that Hirohiko's power obviously stems from paper origami of some sort of deal. I sort of can see this as like a sort of Conan power from Naruto. I never finished Naruto, and I really don't remember really anything about it, but I'm pretty sure Conan was one of the Akatsuki members and had sort of a paper origami power. Now, I don't really remember most of what happened there with it, but I sort of just seem to remember that that was something that happened in that series. But with this image here of like a origami butterfly, it really seems, yeah, Hirohiko's power leads into this whole origami thing. The other idea of the counter-inten special forces, this means that all of these people are going to be dead, because as we know, any type of special force, like here, the anti-cloud gouger special forces, the Kabanaki steam squad, any type of squad or force in Kagurabachi isn't going to live long, so I take it by the end of next chapter, Chihiro will find a way to completely kill most of these people, because from what we see here, there are 3 other Danseki Hishaku sorcerers here, and of course Hirohiko, so it is a formidable fighting force that Chihiro is going to have to go against here, but a little interesting. We also get full confirmation that Yura is the Hishaku leader's name now. We sort of put that with like 2 and 2 together last time, but it is sort of nice to know that, all right, we don't have to call this person John Hishaku. They are actually just Yura, the Hishaku leader, and that's really all there is to it there. As for far as predictions for going into the next chapter, I really don't have a good idea about what we're going to be getting on to next. I think we're just going to either be focusing mainly on this Chihiro versus Hirohiko versus all of the Danseki sorcerers next time, but I can also see a world in which we just follow like Aruha and Haruki as they make their way to the Senkutsuji temple and have to deal with stuff there. But I do feel like we're probably going to be sticking with Chihiro, being that he is the main character, and being the next chapter is chapter 50, I can definitely see that being the way it's going here. With that, I really don't have too much else to say. This, like I said, this was a very action-based chapter with a bunch of events going on here. I, again, really like that moment where sort of Hikari goes in and, like, pulls down Aruha by his hair to make sure that they don't get cut by the Kuro attack. I do find it, like, a pretty interesting sort of, like, move, and I feel like whenever this gets animated, it will be done in, like, a very, like, cool, like, Sakuga sort of way to where it's just, like, one flowing movement after another flowing movement. It'll definitely look cool, that's sort of what I'm getting at. But with that, I really don't have too much else to say about this chapter. I feel like this may have been, like, a shorter video, maybe, because I don't think I've talked about this one for, like, the almost 30 minutes, but I can't see the recording time, so I may be decently surprised whenever I sort of open this thing up. But with that, I really don't have too much else to say. Again, this was Kagurabachi chapter number 49. If you did enjoy this video, I got some other Kagurabachi videos on the channel. You can go check out those and think, oh, hey, Kagurabachi's cool. I think it's pretty cool. I also do plenty other anime and manga related content on the channel. I cover like anime series like Hell's Paradise, Kaguraku, Chainsaw Man, and Bleach whenever like those various things are running, and I also cover a variety of manga. We actually just started a new series on Navigatoria here the other day, so you can go check out that video on the channel. And if you did like this video, hopefully you don't mind subscribing to the channel, leave me a like. So small ways you can really help out the channel here. And leave me a comment down below saying what you guys thought about this chapter yourself. If you think Hirohiko's power of this origami bird sort of stuff is pretty cool, or if you're more interested in seeing what happens next time. I'd be very interested to hear all of your guys' thoughts and opinions. But with that, I really don't have too much else to say. Again, this was Kagurabachi chapter number 49, titled Deadlock. Of course, being that the deadlock is about to be broken. And I'll catch you guys next time for Kagurabachi chapter number 50. Again, thank you guys for watching, and this will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.